Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabarty. Today we are going to be continuing on to talk about the Super Bowl. Of course, it is Super Bowl week, so naturally we're going to start off every show talking about that. Today on that front, I want to sort of break down the positional groups for both teams and give my thoughts on who has the advantage between the two teams at each of those groups. Then we are going to be talking about Bryce Young, actually the number one overall pick for the Panthers last season. There was a very interesting conversation going on the internet that I was compelled by, that I just sort of want to talk about, and I haven't had the chance to give my thoughts on him as a whole, so I'm going to do that. In the second half of the show, we're going to be talking some NBA, starting with the Milwaukee Bucks, who fall to 1-4 since Doc Rivers has taken over as their head coach on the sidelines. So going to be giving my thoughts on what point it is we should start worrying about this team. And finally, going to give my thoughts on a couple of the games from last night in the Bulls and the Mavericks wins, plus an update on the NBA trade deadline. But before we get into anything, just a reminder to like and follow, and to remember to use the chat to make this show as interactive as possible. And if you would like to tip or donate, use the link at the bottom of the screen. That is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. So without further ado, getting into our first segment here, talking about the positional matchups for the upcoming Super Bowl against the Niners and the Chiefs. I'm just going to go through each of the different groups and say which I believe has the advantage going forward for this game, and also just sort of key in on different groups that I think are going to be the most significant for this matchup in particular. Starting off with quarterbacks, there's really not too much to say on this front. It is Patrick Mahomes versus Brock Purdy. Mahomes is on a tier of his own, so he's playing for legacy stuff as far as becoming an all-timer. He already is, but to really put himself in that upper echelon, whereas Brock Purdy is really more so just looking to establish himself. So there's really not too much that needs to be said on that front. Obviously goes to the Chiefs. As far as running backs, I think that this is the 49ers. Isaiah Pacheco is a very good young player, and I think that he's added a very different element to the Kansas City Chiefs game and their identity over the course of the past two seasons. He was a day 3 pick for the Chiefs a couple years ago, and he has helped transform the Chiefs to be less one-dimensional. Of course, in the first few Mahomes Chiefs seasons, it was so pass-centric and fixated on Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. They had to make tough decisions letting Hill go, and Isaiah Pacheco has really helped be that guy to sort of uplift their running game. And it's interesting because it was not all that long ago that Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a first-round running back draft choice for them, and he was serviceable for their first couple Super Bowl runs, but really Pacheco has been the one to elevate it to a different level, which has been just so timely for them, because without him, it would be very hard for them to continue to do what they've been doing and have this more balanced attack. And quick note on the balanced attack front, it is very true. I think that Pacheco has been so vital for them. I also do, just when it comes to this conversation, I think a lot of people are sort of spinning the way that Ravens and Chiefs game to a different level, saying, oh, the Chiefs were just trying to chew clock. They knew that they were going to be able to get stops, and they just wanted to, keep the ball on the ground and take up as much time as possible. I just don't believe that the Chiefs were trying to run out the clock for the entire second half. And I think that more so, it's not about Mahomes. Not every single thing about the Chiefs has to be about Mahomes. I think it speaks more to the defense. And yes, you have a little bit more of an option on the run game when you have Isaiah Pacheco, but I just feel like the sort of fallout as we're getting, further from the game, the Chiefs offense got shut down. That's what happened in the second half. They scored 0 points, but they were able to win because, yes, there was at least more faith in the run game, and Pacheco doesn't make the negative plays. He doesn't struggle with fumbling, so he adds that element to them, but that was not the entire game plan of the second half. Quick little tangent there. It's just something I've been hearing a lot in the national sports media, and I just don't think that we can just forget what actually happened in that last game. But on the note of running backs here, again, Pacheco, great. Christian McCaffrey, greater. He is the best running back in the NFL, in my opinion, when fully healthy. He is the most valuable player on the 49ers as far as their offense goes. Love Brock Purdy as well, but Christian McCaffrey is really the engine that gets going, which is why having 2 weeks to prepare for this 49ers offense, you have to believe that Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs defensive coordinator, and that entire coaching staff, that defense, has been focused in on, can we force Christian McCaffrey out of the game? And you're never going to be able to fully eliminate him. I mean, he was even slow getting going in the first half of that Lions game. If you remember on the broadcast, they kept flashing that statistic about 3 Detroit rushers that were outgaining Christian McCaffrey between Gibbs, Montgomery, and Jameson Williams, who had the end around that went for a 40-yard touchdown. So, it started slow for them, and as a result, the Chiefs weren't, or the 49ers, I should say, weren't able to get going once they started feeding him, the best running back in the league, and the reason why I'm picking them over him and that running back group over the Chiefs running back group, because they got him and Deebo Samuel going and allowed them to play their game more. So on that note of Deebo and the receiver core, I think that this is probably just about as big of a gap other than maybe the quarterback group, but the difference is I think that Brock Purdy is still good, solid. The Chiefs receivers are still not good, and I know that they've been better, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling had the big catch to sort of ice the game last week on third down, but I still don't have all too much confidence in the Chiefs their receivers to actually show up and for them to individually make plays. Now, you have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. You have a good running back in Isaiah Pacheco. Can these receivers win the one-on-one matchups against the 49ers defensive backs that can be, not a liability, but they can be beaten? Who on the Chiefs receiving end is going to do so? Rashee Rice has put together a very solid rookie season. He's come along more and more as the year goes. They are going to need him to step up, but all in all, from receivers 1 through 5, I think that this is the 49ers all day. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Jawan Jennings came up big for them in the Green Bay game in the divisional round. I think that the 49ers just, they've been consistent. They haven't been dropping the ball as much. The Chiefs, on the other end, they have guys with incredible drop percentages, and incredible not in a good way, but they have that. They have the whole Kadarius Toney saga that's going on right now. Just, they're a little bit of a mess as a group. Now, lucky for them, when you move on to the tight ends here, where Travis Kelce is essentially their best receiver, I know that this isn't maybe the most popular national opinion right now, somewhat because of sort of the underlying storylines going into this game. But if I'm talking for one Super Bowl, one game, who would I rather have, Travis Kelce or George Kittle? I'm going with Travis Kelce. George Kittle is the better tight end as a whole. He was an all-pro guy this year. Meanwhile, Travis Kelce really showed his first signs of slowing down significantly during the course of the regular season. But I think that we've seen him elevate his game once again. We're now talking about the guy who has the all-time most playoff receptions in NFL history. That is for a reason. It's because Mahomes loves him for a good reason. He goes to him in all of these big third downs, big spots, and Kelce gets it done. George Kittle, again, better all-around tight end. Blocking is a very important part of the position. Maybe not quite as much when the league was more ground and pound, but you see the George Kittle clips of him going berserk on the offensive line, laughing at guys after plowing them over. He's a psycho in the best way possible. And he's somebody that, again, if I'm building my team long term at this point, or even for the full course of a season where I need consistency every single game from him, I'm going with George Kittle to build my offense around. But in this particular moment, I think that Travis Kelce is going to be a bigger factor. Now, Kittle has been a little quiet, still to his standards, I suppose I should preface that as a little quiet. Through their first couple playoff wins, he had that 30-yard touchdown, and he had a handful of catches against the Packers, and had a catch, I believe, on their game-winning drive as well. So it's not like he's been invisible, but only 2 catches for 27 yards last week. Meanwhile, Kelce is going 11 catches for 116 yards, and he's had touchdowns in multiple games now. And, it's a tough position here. These are 2 of the greatest tight ends in the league today and have been for the past handful of seasons. George Kittle finally putting together a healthy year. And who knows, if the Chiefs come out and they try and put all this extra attention on shutting down Christian McCaffrey in the run game, then maybe this is the playoff game that Kittle really breaks out. We'll see. But again, I'm giving the slight edge to the Kansas City Chiefs and specifically Travis Kelce over Kittle. Offensive line, sort of forgotten about. I feel like a lot of the times, even though every time I'm on this show, I seem to be talking about offensive line and the line of scrimmage. But I give again, a little bit of a slight edge, but to the Chiefs. I know they are missing their all-pro guard, Joe Thuney. Last week, it was Nick Allegretti starting in his place. Got to be honest, I haven't been crunching the film on him. It wasn't significantly that he, got bodied. He wasn't, allowing sacks or anything. He got pushed around a little bit in the run game, but not to a point where I think that he's a massive liability. And speaking of liabilities, that's maybe a little bit dramatic, but the 49ers right tackle has been struggling a lot as of late. Colton McKivitz allowed a handful of sacks during the playoffs this run and late in the season, and somebody that, I think that there's a real chance that once we sort of start talking about the defense here, could get pushed around a little bit. Trent Williams is still a monster, another all-pro first-team selection for him on the left side, but I think that right side is a little vulnerable. And moving on to the defensive line groups here, I do give the slight edge to the 49ers, and maybe I'm just a prisoner of the hype almost. You look at those names, I've talked about it on this show, you feel like they should maybe be getting a little more production than they are when you have Bosa, Chase Young, Javon Hargrave, and Eric Armstead. They're all healthy. They just haven't really been getting the push you would expect them to, given all of their individual reputations. So, maybe I'm a sucker. They are more well-rounded, though, than the Chiefs. I think that the Chiefs have 2 stars. Chris Jones is the best player just about at his position as far as interior defensive linemen in the year 2023-24. And I think that their first-round pick from last season, George Karlaftis, has really come along for them. He was up to double-digit sacks this season. He has handful of QB hits. I think it's 4 through the first couple playoff games, along with 2.5 sacks. So he's really come along as well. I would expect to line him up on that edge against McKivitz to try and get a little bit of a mismatch there. I really like what he's been doing for the Chiefs as of late in this sort of rebuilding of the Chiefs defense that can help be more of the identity than we have seen in the past. Moving on to linebackers, it has to be the 49ers. I mean, just another example of you're talking about one of the guys, the best at their position, Fred Warner. I think he's the best linebacker in football. He is an animal. He's everywhere. And I thought that it was interesting the way that coming out of media day, he was talking about a little bit. He knows that he can be a little more aggressive on that front end, and it comes off on film. But because he talked about the faith that he sort of had in some of those back end guys to help cover him up, there was an interesting exchange. Tayshaun Gibson, their safety, who we're going to be getting to momentarily, talked about the pass deflection that he had against Sam Laporta. Shout out Theo Ash for the great interview questions there. But a very good linebacker duo between Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, obviously. And the Chiefs absolutely have a good linebacking core themselves. They have Willie Gay coming back from injury this week. They have Drew Tranquil. They have Nick Bolton, Bolton has been another one of these leaders for them on defense that has really made a big difference for them in sort of rearing its head on the defensive side of the ball. So I like the Kansas City Chiefs, but just between those two, you can't really pick them over the 49ers. But again, don't overlook the Chiefs linebacking group is what I should say. Defensive backs, I would say it's pretty handedly the Kansas City Chiefs. I just think they have the all-pro talent in L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie. Their safeties between Eric Reed and Mike Edwards are both very solid as well. There's really no holes in the secondary there for them. They are very set up nicely in this and has been a big part of it. San Francisco, they lose obviously a key piece of that with Talanoa Hufanga, who was an all-pro player for them last season. They lose him after about 10 games or so this year. Jair Brown has stepped in, and he's been solid in that role. He was a third-round rookie for them. He's been playing the position fine, but obviously not the all-pro level. And as a result, they just don't really have any of those stars like the Chiefs do in the secondary. Charvarius Ward, the former Chief that was with the Chiefs the last time these teams matched up, he's a very good player in his own right. And then Ambry Thomas has come along as the year has been put together, but just sort of a lot on his shoulders. Thomas didn't start for a stretch. I know he was dealing with some injuries, but for about 2 months during the regular season, he was sort of not starting, in and out of the starting group for that San Francisco back end. Lenore is a solid player too, but again, I just think that they definitely have the ability to allow big plays. Now, the Chiefs haven't been the most explosive deep play offense, but when you have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, it's always possible. He can put the deep balls on his guys, so we will see. And then finally, special teams, I give the edge to Kansas City. Mostly talking about kickers here. Harrison Butker has been in the moment plenty of times now through these runs with the Chiefs, so you don't really have any questions there. The 49ers are starting a rookie kicker in Jake Moody, who has had some ups and downs. He's been mostly solid for them, but this does feel like it could be a game that comes down to special teams a little bit, and I would have a little bit of a hesitation there. And finally, as far as coaches go, two great coaching staffs, really, from their head coaches and down. I really like both defensive coordinators in this game as well. And then obviously, between Andy Reid and Shanahan, the offensive coordinator maybe isn't quite as important of a role, but I'm giving the edge to the Chiefs. We've just seen Andy Reid do it before. He's been a very prominent coach throughout the past decade plus, and Shanahan is also another great offensive line. In some ways, you can make the argument that Reid sort of paved the way in some sense as far as creativity and offensive mindedness, and allowing that to be the sort of movement of offensive minded head coaches in the NFL, at least as of recent years. And I would like to leave behind this Shanahan choker talk and not being able to come back, but it obviously has been part of his story, partially due to the last time these two teams met in the Super Bowl. It was Shanahan's offense going cold down the stretch and Andy Reid's offense scoring 21 straight points to go and win that game. So that is what I have for at least each individual position. I'll count it up and see who we give the points to, but for now we're going to be taking a break, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to move off of the Super Bowl briefly and talk about actually a rookie quarterback situation from this past season, so stick with us.